What's the most fireable thing someone has done but they kept the job? I heard this from a coworker. As it happened before I started working at the office. Apparently one of the employees was discovered to be hosting and profiting from pornographic websites, which he was hosting on the company's servers. He was not immediately fired. The owners politely asked him to stop. He was only fired after he refused to stop. Guy comes into the office on a Saturday. Office is empty. Makes a point of wearing a hoodie and baseball hat so he won't be recognized on camera. Digs around someone's desk until he finds a key to secured computer room. Enters room and steals computer. Was caught and asked to apologize. I was dumbfounded that he wasn't fired until I learned he was personally hired by the CEO many years ago. I worked at a Denny's restaurant years ago. We had an HIV+ employee. He once cut his thumb with a knife and stuck his entire hand directly into the commercial ice machine in the kitchen. I was absolutely horrified at what had just happened. And immediately told my manager. The ice machine had to be emptied and professionally sanitized. The ice contaminator never lost his job. Never even really got talked to about what happened. HIV or not. What he did was awful. Never have I seen something so unsanitary at any job I've had to date. Throwing a $40,000 piece of equipment in the dumpster because he thought it was trash. And then shutting his phone off so our professor can't reach him and has to call me in the middle of the night to tell me to go dumpster diving. Fucking grad school. I worked in a call center where a coworker got caught. Not once but twice. For masturbating at his desk when speaking with female customers. HR spoke with him about it. Everyone knew what he had done but they just kept him on regardless. I just posted this in the weirdest thing a guy has done to you thread, but it also applies here. When I was 15 I worked at an amusement park and we had a sheet with all the employees' phone numbers on it so people could ask each other covers. There was a 17-year-old who worked there who took my number and then texted me his detailed plans to pay me. Told the people who owned the park and they didn't care so I changed my number and got a new job. Edit. No, I didn't go to the police. I was 15 at the time and just wanted to get myself out of the situation. I was afraid if I went to the police I would be stuck dealing with this guy for a long time and afraid of what people would say about me. If it happened to me now I would go to the police, but I wasn't ready to deal with that at 15. I yelled at my boss and I quote, "Your bullshit is the reason our office is going down the f-king drain. So stop f-king up." The next day I was brought before the Grams. He read my write-up aloud to me, while trying not to laugh and smirk the whole time. Then he sent me home for the rest of the day, and told me to have a nice day and we'll see you tomorrow. All while still smiling. A dude I worked with at Sbarro back in the day informed me, a cashier pizza maker, on his second day of work, that he lied about his criminal history on his employment application and that he had served time in jail for attempted murder, accessory to murder and arson, and showed me a local news article on his phone about a local student who was murdered. The charred body was found with bullets. I told my manager that night after he went home. He decided not to fire him because he was afraid he would murder him and his family. Probably would have. Ultimately fired about a week later by a regional manager for stealing spaghetti. Edit. As someone pointed out, attempted murder doesn't make sense since the dude died. It was accessory to murder. Double quote. We have one woman who calls in sick for 7/10 shifts. When she finally got in trouble for it, she brought in a doctor's note that was too illegible to actually read. Scrawled on what looked like scrap paper. HR still accepted it. She then has the audacity to come in shopping on days she's called in sick. A guy at the company I used to work for allegedly left the gate switches on an elevator, jumped out. Basically the circuit that tells it not to move while the door's open. Kind of one of the worst things you can do in my trade, as it can literally result in a person being cut in half. Chef used to shoot up in the disabled toilets. Regularly stole alcohol from the bar. Had the restaurant closed for a police raid and all staff searched. Manager decided it was easier to wait for him to go to jail. Best chef there and only one that spoke English. Still not in jail. Guy got caught with kiddie porn on his work computer. But because they didn't remove him from the building according to policy, he was able to keep his job. They gave him the option to work from home. So he took it. So now the government of Canada is paying $70K a year for a pedophile who stays at home. Makes me sick. A good friend of mine works at a dealership where he drives cars on a daily basis. He was doing a bunch of pre-delivery inspections at the end of his shift about a month ago now. He was test driving a brand new, fully loaded Jeep Wrangler. He looked down to set the cruise and make sure the heater works as it should. When he looked up, he had no time to react before slamming into the back of a Ford Escape and sending it flying. No one was hurt, luckily, but both vehicles totaled. The kicker of the story? He hasn't had a license in over a year. He lied to all of his bosses about it and was persistent that he had a license. I just had him change my oil today. Actually, still working full time. Just not allowed to drive vehicles. This took place in the military and this douche, we shall call Duffy, is lucky to even get off easy. One holiday Duffy was going out of town and asked a co-worker to watch his place and dog. The person watching the dog was doing a horrible job, so I took over. There was poop all over his carpet and the dog tore up some furniture too. While assessing his place, I noticed something on his desk. He had 2 monitors with yellow stickers on them. TSC. So he took these from work. We'll talk about that later. Also on his desk there were 5 hard drives with the same sticker. He took classified information out of a secure environment and took it home. All that happened to him was a slap on the wrist and leadership trying to keep it quiet since they knew it would ruin his life if it got out. A teacher I had in secondary school decided not to come to class and instead go smoke weed behind the school. He was caught by the vice principal, sent to class high as a kite, and proceeded to tell the class he's most likely getting fired. It's our fault and we're all a bunch of cunts. He didn't get fired. Somehow. The CEO at my former company had an affair with one of our clients. His wife found scandalous emails between him and the other chick and sent them to all that. Made for a fun next morning. So there was this guy. A real high up guy in the organization. Sort of like a regional head position. He was in the middle of a sexual harassment lawsuit that he was 1000% definitely going to lose. He had straight up told a woman that she would have to have sex with him in order to keep her job and get a raise. And he had said so in email. There has never been a more clear-cut case of sexual harassment in the history of sexual harassment. Company was gonna have to pay out the big bucks on this one. Not only was this guy not fired until the absolute bitter end, but he was actually invited to be the friggin' keynote speaker at the organization's women's conference right in the middle of all this. How does one even justify that? Okay, so this summer I pressure washed for a professional pressure washing company. At the time I was only 16 driving a huge box truck all over creation to do petty jobs. Anyways, I had to drive 3 hours to a job one day and the pressure washer wouldn't start. I was in and out of an auto shop borrowing tools trying to fix a machine I knew nothing about. My boss told me to try one last thing and out of my frustration I bought the part and never tried it and just drove home telling my boss it didn't work and I was going home no matter what he said. When I got there he tried the new part and of course it fired right up. Instead of getting fired I got $1 raise because I told him I was tired of his bullshit. Customer comes into shipping service 15 minutes before closing. Customer spills a fair amount of liquid mercury in the lobby. Supervisor sees spill and leaves it. Closing the shop up on time. Supervisor tells no one. Morning custodian attempts to mop up the liquid mercury, making an even bigger mess. Hazmat team is called. They clean the building, take several pair of shoes, and charge us something like $40K. Nothing is done to supervisor. When I was an intern at this small company, there was a woman who would blast pro-life propaganda YouTube videos from her section of the office. If it wasn't a family-owned business I guarantee HR would have had her fired. One time my old boss erroneously ordered an entire tractor trailer full of cardboard boxes. These are stored flat, mind you. So that is an unholy fuck ton of cardboard boxes for a small company like us. $20. 000 worth. 2 years later we still have most of them. He kept the job until he quit for a new one, where he was fired after a couple months for drinking at work. He used to drink at work almost every day when he worked at my company too. So nobody was really surprised that he was responsible for what became known as box gut. A supervisor in another department recently screamed at one of our employees until she cried. The employee was about 8 months pregnant at the time. The offense? Using the restroom while it was being cleaned. This same sup has also gotten in an employee's face. Interrupted a meeting by slamming folders down on another sup's desk. And yelled at various other employees. Something I did. I was a janitor in a building full of medical suites. I did my normal routine and remember one bag of trash being sort of out in the open, which was strange, but I didn't think much of it. I get a call at 6 AM from my boss saying that there was a bag of about 20k worth of tools missing and asked if I knew anything about it. I remembered the out of place trash bag and told her about it. What came next was terrifying. My boss spoke to me in a calm and collected manner. She was this old hag that absolutely flipped her shit at the smallest indiscretion or mistake. She yelled. She cursed. She shook her fist normally. I had never heard her be so calm before. Anyways, she said that the dumpster had been emptied at 4 AM, so she would have to turn this over to insurance, then hung up without saying another word. I instantly panicked and felt like the biggest idiot in the world. I didn't even know if I should bother to show up for work that night, but did anyways. She never mentioned it again and I kept my job until I went back to school. My coworker is super nosy and looked at some confidential documents on my boss's desk that had everyone's pay on it. She told a few people who made what? Word got around. And he didn't fire her or write her up. She also gossips with customers who come in and will go shopping next door during work hours. She is my boss's assistant and there are only 3 of us that work in this office, not including the others, here including myself. Basically he is desperate and keeps her around so he doesn't have to be here or work often. No call no show 3 days in a row. Then did the same thing 2 days in a row a couple weeks later. Still didn't get fired. But then she just stopped coming in altogether. And when my manager called her, she said she quit 3 days ago. Without saying anything. So at least she's gone. Being caught masturbating. Not even in the bathroom but right there in the cubicle while staring at the office hottie. It helps when your cousin is the project manager. Guy at work got mad at a printer and smashed it. There were meetings with managers. Meetings with peers. Anger management policy reviews. HR was involved. The case was formally documented and the punishment was meted out. Until further notice the guy was no longer allowed to use that printer. Left a Nokia prototype phone, running Symbian, on the table in a pub while drinking. Where it was promptly stolen, never to be seen again. He kept his job. And in fact still kept it when the office was closed about a year later and almost the entire staff team was made redundant. We do oil changes on cars at my job and my co-worker forgets to put the oil cap back on the car. Time and time again. This has happened a number of times. I have no idea how he still has a job or even remembers how to breathe. Among other things. He threw a battery on the ground after taking it out of the car and left it there. Leaking battery acid. For the morning crew to come in and find. I broke my boss's nose when I was 16. Punched him right in the snout. It was an accident and I never felt worse at work. His wife came in a few days later and thanked me because he stopped snoring. Not sure if she said that to make me feel better. But it kind of made me feel better. A doctor tries to resuscitate a patient on an operating table before the patient's surgery started. He then called the time of death and left the room. A nurse in the room then happened to check for a pulse. And noticed that there was one. He spoke up. alerting everyone still in the room that the patient was still alive. The anesthesiologist was against further resuscitation because the time of death was already called. The patient barely lived. Thanks to the nurse catching the pulse. The anesthesiologist didn't even so much as get a warning. This was at a VA hospital. My second shift team leader grabbed a bottle of hand lotion and flipped the lid open. He approached a busty co-worker and made grunting sounds and sprayed hand lotion all over her chest. He's still there, but I quit 3 years ago. I work in a butcher shop at the present time. Older butcher talks about a time when he worked at a grocery store in his younger years. He requested a day off months in advance and was told last minute that he had to work. So, he ground up a whole box of beef tenderloins, the cut that becomes fillets. That's about $1,200, $1,500 worth of beef straight into the garbage. He worked there for years after that incident. When I worked at a summer camp, I had one particular member of staff that everyone knew probably wouldn't last. He was openly racist. Made the girls feel uncomfortable. That sort of deal. Anyway, because he was the son of a coach, it was a sports camp. He was able to get away with a lot more. One day, he was out doing sailing with some of the campers. When one of them beat him at some sort of game. Said counselor responded by pushing said kid off the paddleboard before loudly declaring, "I forgot niggers can't swim." Sorry, in full earshot of many counselors and senior staff. So they suspended him for a month. Upon returning, he decided it would be a good idea to walk around in his cabin full of 10-year-old boys fully nude. Which finally got him fired. I once worked with a man who just couldn't seem to keep his pants zipped and also aggressively refused to wear underwear. Ironically enough, I think the fact that he was pretty overweight and unpleasant to look at kind of saved him, because people just kind of did their best to look the other way when he was around. On at least 3 occasions I accidentally saw his penis. He just got a new job and quit about a year after I started working with him. I'm not sure if anyone in HR ever did anything. Took the company car while off the clock. Drove drunk to the beer store. In Canada we have the beer store. Got more alcohol. Walked home. Leaving the car not only unlocked, but open. He was a unionized worker and said, "No one ever told me not to do that." Double quote. Another one. Same company. Not exactly the same. There's a 6-week training. With exam at the end. 10 minutes into the exam a guy gets up. Says FCK this bullshit and walks out. Last I checked he still works there. Girl I work with at Pizza Hut prank called the place on a Friday night at 6 during a heavy rush. Was placing a huge complicated order for delivery. Then said, "Hey, never mind, it's me, what time do I work tomorrow?" I'm only a shift manager, so I couldn't fire her, and my boss has no guts to do it. She does things like this all the time. I work at a women's prison. Female officer becomes friends with inmate Jones, even though that's a big no-no. Officer brings inmate Jones a cupcake for her birthday. An even bigger no-no. She gets moved from one area where she was working alone to an area with other officers. A couple months later they need her to cover a different work alone area. Guess who keeps showing up at the new area to visit? Inmate Jones. Now female officer is being watched again. But not fired yet. I work IT at a large hospital with a number of satellite clinics. We were moving some racks during the remodel, and one of them has the main router with the point-to-point connections for our satellite clinics. I labeled the cables, removed them and moved the rack, with help. Of course. I plugged all the fiber cables back in and watched lights go green. Turns out I didn't see all the lights go green. I was just tired and impatient. Also turns out I didn't label them all correctly. I killed the internet at a satellite location for 3+ days while we thought it was a broken line card. Nope. I was just an idiot. This router's first port was numbered 0. My first cable was numbered 1. Everything was off by 1. Still employed there. I worked for a prison. An ADSEG inmate filed paperwork on a female staff member accusing her of masturbating in front of his cell. Sure enough, they review the camera, and for 7 minutes she stood outside of this guy's cell with her hand inside of her pants. When they investigated this incident, she claimed she was scratching. Kept her job. I work for an airline, and one of my co-workers while on a flight as a standby got drunk in first class and go into an argument with the flight attendant. It got so heated that the captain came out mid-flight to tell her to calm down. Police waiting at the gate for her took her into custody. She wasn't charged and was on suspension for 11 days and came back into the break room and "you not said I'm back bitches." Double quote. A former co-worker of mine really wanted to have sex with this one girl who was another co-worker. He stalked her like crazy and actually wrote up a sexual intercourse contract for her to sign. Some 50 Shades of Grey like shit. He also kept telling her all of these sexual and vulgar things that he wanted to do to her. My former boss got word of all this nonsense and had a little chat with the guy. Turns out, despite committing sexual harassment, he did not get fired. My former boss just kept them on separate shifts so they wouldn't work together, although that didn't last too long, as my boss forgot about the whole thing a few months after. The girl co-worker quit that job about 6 months later. The guy co-worker actually got promoted as a manager about 8 months later. I dropped a 10,000 pounds battery out of a forklift and then tried to use a chain to pick it back up. Chain touches contacts. Chain glows red. Chain melts battery. Fire extinguisher dust covers entire store. Left to become a policeman a year later. I have a government job and we have people who work here and literally do nothing. I mean, literally nothing. We have a guy who shows up 3 hours late, leaves 3 hours early, does nothing but talk on the phone here, makes inappropriate jokes and interrupts us all from our work. He only comes in maybe once a week or twice. He makes $45K of your tax money. Chemistry lab technician decides to go to a well and collect an oil sample himself. With protests from the operators that it's not the procedure and that it's dangerous, he decides to go to the wellhead itself and collect the sample, even though there is a sampling point further down the line. Wellhead pressure is about 600 C. To give you an idea, if I shoot water at a person at 100 C, it will make a clean hole. Dumbus almost caused a disaster if operators didn't forcefully sew and restrain him. He was very insisting to collect the sample himself. High profile customer ordered 200 etched iPads from our campus store. The lady that placed the order with Apple ordered the 16GB instead of the 32GB like the client wanted. Apple doesn't accept returns of etched products. We then order the correct iPads and are stuck with 216GB iPads. She soon after got a promotion. Girl at my old workplace thought it would be funny to go through the HR folder, get a member of the office's phone number and send him a video of her FCK buddy jerking it. Dumb BTCH forgot that messages show the number it's sent from. I have a few stories about her. The night manager F-ked the store manager's daughter. She also worked there. The following day the main manager stormed in and slapped down a paper in front of night manager on the table and stormed out. I swear smoke was coming out of his ears. Apparently our company has a sheet you have to fill out if you're sleeping with a co-worker stating you will not threaten termination if they don't fulfill sexual acts. This paperwork was printed a lot while I worked there. A nurse I work with shouted obscenities at a patient and threatened her. I reported it. Her daughter reported it. The nurse denied everything and threatened to sue for pregnancy discrimination if she were fired. She still has a job. Today the doctor who comes in on Tuesdays overheard some of her crap. He recorded it on his phone, so I am hoping to see her off the roster soon.